Morning, y'all. I'm having to refilm this part of the video because somehow or another I didn't film it, or I thought I filmed it, but I must not have hit the button, or it was in a different mode or something. I don't know, I'm no cameraman. So what we're going to be doing is improving the Dana 30 front axle and the steering on the XJ. So the plan is we're going to first of all, manual locking hubs, number one thing. And the reason why is because I want to run this Spartan locker in the front axle, but this is also my daily driver, so I don't need a Spartan. I don't need the locker locking up all the time driving down the road. So we're gonna install a manual locking hub kit that came from Yukon. It comes with some heavy duty all steel AVM locking hubs, so that should be plenty strong. And then we're going to put the Spartan locker in. While we got everything apart, we're going to put a truss on the front axle and also gusset the C's, the lower C's on the axle. The manual locking hub kit comes with the stub axles are 4130 chrome moly, so I got 4130 chrome moly axles to match them to go in, and new U-joints and new ball joints and all new steering. It's still going to be tie rod steering. Again, this is my daily driver, and anytime I wheel, it's with the knowledge that I got to drive it to work on Monday, so I'm not doing any wheeling that's going to really cause any problem with just regular old tie rod ends. But it's going to be the 1 ton style solid tie rod across the front with the drag link like a normal car, not that funky XJ steering that's pretty weak. And so basically all the steering parts will be new, and we'll align it and we'll be good to go. So right now we'll jump back to the shop and start disassembling the front axle. So stay tuned. Well, that's unfortunate. We got the first side, the driver's side, stripped down that far. I'm not going to take the steering knuckle off to replace the ball joints until after I get done with the welding. It kind of holds everything in place. But we got the axle shaft out. The unit bearing, as you saw, came apart. What I ended up having to do is take this pin that I found in all of my junk and run it through the back side, and it was small enough to fit in the hole, big enough to not go through the hole, threaded hole in the unit bearing, and used a big old hammer and knocked it on out. So I won't be able to save that unit bearing for later, but I will save the axle shafts and the other parts. And that way, if at some point in the future I ever want to go back to the stock setup, you can just buy a set of unit bearings and put everything back together. But that's that side, so now we'll move over to the other side and strip it down, and then we'll get started on stripping that steering out. So let me get set up for that, and I'll be right back. So when you go to tear these down, the tools you're going to need, you're going to need a 12 millimeter for these caliper bolts, and you're going to need a 13 millimeter 12-point socket for these 3 bolts that hold the unit bearing in back here on the back. And you're going to need a 36 millimeter socket to take the nut off of the axle. When you take this apart, you want to make sure that you don't damage the 3 bolts that hold the unit bearing in, because you're going to reuse those with the new. Either if you're replacing just the unit bearing, you're going to reuse them, but if you're doing this conversion, you're also going to reuse those bolts. So don't just loosen them and then smack them with a hammer to get that unit bearing out. You don't want to do that because you're going to reuse those bolts. So let me get this side took apart. Alright, now that we got the axle shafts and everything out, the next step will be pulling the steering apart. Let me get all these tools put away and the tools for that out, and I'll be right back. Next step is to pull all the steering parts off. We're going to pull the drag link, the tie rod, the steering assist or steering dampener. I'm going to try to pull this off as one piece, leave it together as much as possible because it's going to get put up for just in case. So I'm going to show you how to pull one of these. Hopefully it cooperates. You got to pull this cotter key out of here, out of the castle nut. Once you get that out, got a 3/4 castle nut. That's unfortunate. So that is spinning inside of here. Well. All right. That's not conducive to it being reused. Nope. Always got to be the hard way. All right. So when that happens, pretty much not going to be able to reuse the damn thing. Pretty much got to cut this nut off. So I'll get the Metabo and do that. And we'll be right back. The steering is out. I'm going to apologize now for not filming taking the steering out, but you wouldn't have, I would have had to cut it up so much for all the cussing that you probably wouldn't have seen anything anyways. Drag link fought at the pitman arm. Both tie rod ends fought, one more than the other. One I had ended up having to cut the nut off of, or slit it and hit it with a chisel, cut it in half, and then it fell out after the nut was cut. So yeah, that was that did not go smoothly. So that's done. Now the next step, we got two more things to get off of here before we can start prepping it for putting the welding the truss. We got to remove the differential carrier, and we got to remove that track bar. So let me clear this steering parts out of the way and gather up some more tools, and we'll get on to that. Okay, so now we're going to remove this carrier so we can put the locker in it, and also we have to remove this carrier to get to the inner axle seals. There's one on each side here, and you can't get them in there if you don't remove the gear carrier. So what you want to, let me get this thing to behave here. So you'll notice on here, each one of these has a stamp on it. This one has an N in the correct orientation, and right here there's an N. And over on the other side, there's a sideways N, or a Z, I guess, but it's an N. And then over here, there's a sideways N. And see, all the stamps are at the bottom. That lets you know which way these go on, so you can put them back in exactly the same place. But in addition to that, I also set them out on the table in the way I took them out too, which I'll show you in a minute. But the important thing is, when you take these off, keep track of everything. You're going to have shims in here. You need to make sure you keep track of those, where they go, because that's the setup. And this gear carrier is good right where it's at. I don't need to adjust it at all. Everything's nice and tight the way it is. I'm just taking it out to make it easier to put the locker in and to put the inner axle seals in. So I want to keep everything together so it can go back exactly the way that it came out. So you'll need a 5/8 for these bolts. Let's back the camera up a little bit here. Alright, so there's one. Let me put it over here. You want to be careful when you take this other clamp off. You don't want this thing falling out and hitting the floor. I don't think it's going to, but I have seen one. Hold on a minute. I have seen them so loose in the past that they, as soon as you took the clamps off, they just fell in the floor. This one looks pretty tight where it's at, so put this back up. Grab a pry bar. There we go. Now's the part where you kind of wish you had 4 hands, but all right. So we got those out of there. And this is that inner axle seal here that we're going to be replacing right in here. But we won't be doing that until we're ready to go back together with it. So for now, what I'm going to do is put the cover back on it to keep dirt and grime out of there while I'm grinding and welding on this axle. And then go ahead and pull this track bar off, and we'll be ready to start prepping for the welding. So I'll knock that out real quick. Let me show you what I was talking about as far as keeping your parts where they go. What you can do in addition to the stamps, which is good. Let's see, I threw this up on the table, and I've got passenger top, driver top, got them laid out the way they came out, bearings on the right sides, and then I'll clean all that up, put the locker in it, and then all that will go back together just the way it is. These bearings are good. We're not going to do anything to them, so everything will go back in just the way it was. All right, let me get that other stuff done and we'll be back. All right, at this point we've got everything stripped off of here that we've got to get off, that's either getting replaced or is just in the way for what I'm doing. So tomorrow, when we have all day, because I've got to quit here in a minute to go pick up kid from school, we will prep this area all up, and we'll have this one, we'll have a truss there, and then this short piece will go there like that, and then we got this piece that will go in there. I'll have to tap it in there with a hammer a little bit and get it straight, but you get kind of the idea of where that's going. And then on each side we'll gusset these bottom C's just like that, and we'll get all that cleaned up, welded up, and throw a coat of paint on it, and then we'll be ready to start going back with all the new parts. So tomorrow will be a new video. This will be the end of this video, and appreciate y'all watching, and we will see you in the next video. Have a good one.